even, at one point made sure that Dianne Feinstein had the floor at that table. I'm calling on you. Come forth. And she said, well, I don't know if you would listen to this. We'll listen. Put it out there. And then this. I mean, I know that things don't happen simultaneously, but unfortunate, I would say.
But it's still, as far as the president is concerned, he is still, as he did in this most recent tweet, is calling this the single greatest witch hunt in American history. He says it continues. There was no collusion. Everybody, including the Dems, knows there was no collusion. And yet on and on it goes. Russia and the world is laughing at the stupidity they are witnessing. Republicans should finally take control. Chris.
Well, they pressed that one guy to death with stones in Salem. So I think that guy would say that was the biggest witch hunt.
Literally.
Literally.
But to actually do those things.
Yes, they did.
Unfortunately.
But in this case, look, what they do in Congress matters less and less and less. We are down to recriminations. We are down to scoring partisan points. We are down to trying to get the last word in. This is I said that. I released the last release.
Yep.
So we're down to that point, and that's fine. It's Congress. We don't take them too seriously. What matters now, who's got the ball?
Mueller.
Yep.
Mueller's got the ball, and everything now depends on when is Trump going to sit down and talk to Mueller? What is the nature of that interview going to be like? How much of it is going to be written? How much of it's going to be in person? Who else is going to be called? And the most important thing Chuck Grassley said going forward, the reporter said, is Jared Kushner off the hook? And he said, not by a long shot.
Right. Let's not let that get lost in all this. Meantime, we've got another wrinkle in this dossier story. President Trump's personal lawyer, Michael Cohen, filed a defamation suit over it. He's suing Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, and BuzzFeed, and tweeting this, quote, enough is enough of the fake Russian dossier. Just filed a defamation suit against BuzzFeed News for publishing the lie-filled document on POTUS and me. Katie?
Well, I think it's fair to say that the document is defamatory. However, I think this lawsuit is going nowhere. The president of the United States has been a public figure. He's now a public official, but he's been a public figure essentially his entire life. His attorney, Michael Cohen, is also a public figure, and the bar is very, very high for libel and defamation suits. So they can win maybe on the PR here. They can make a statement about the intimidation and don't, publish this stuff because we'll run you into court and rack up your legal fees. But in terms of actually winning the lawsuit, I don't think it's going to go very far.
I also am not sure that Team Trump wants to expose the full dossier to legal vetting, because there are parts of it that potentially are true. Some of the most salacious stuff is probably not, or possibly not. But if they want a judge to be able to go through every part of the dossier as part of a discovery process, I actually don't think that
they could have unsealed it.
Maybe they're confident that there's nothing there. Maybe they're fine.
I think that is a false confidence. If you go through the entire dossier, there are many smart people in this field who believe at least some of it is true.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say, because I think when people look at the story, they have not definitively drawn a line between the president and his attorney. But this is his attorney's lawsuit, and he has been a public figure, so to speak, but not like a household name.
He had the most famous clip of the 2016 election.
That's true. What polls?
Which polls? All of them.
All of them. That's true.
Never forget. Never forget.
Exactly. All right, we'll leave it there. Some of President Trump's biggest critics are rethinking their opposition after an extraordinary event at the White House yesterday, when the president led a bipartisan and bicameral meeting of lawmakers with the cameras on. Plus, the two sides seeming to come closer to a solution on those so-called dreamers. But will the country get more border security in return?
We come back with this Fox News alert. The White House is responding to a federal judge's decision to temporarily block the president's push to end Obama-era protections for illegal immigrants who came to the United States as children, the so-called dreamers. The White House is calling this move by this judge outrageous. The judge's ruling coming after the president led a nearly hour-long bipartisan meeting on camera on immigration, and we got to see all of it.
We're here today to advance bipartisan immigration reform that serves the needs of the American families, workers, and taxpayers. It should be a bill of love, and we can do that. But it also has to be a bill where we're able to secure our border. So in order to secure it, we need a wall It has to be a bill to end chain migration. The other is to cancel the lottery program. They call it visa lottery. I really do believe Democrat and Republican, the people sitting around this table, want to get something done in good faith, and I think we're on our way to do it.
The president said we'd have enough to chew on for about 2 weeks, and then he invited those reporters out. Democratic Senator Chris Coons believes the president may be able to push Congress to a deal.
So what I thought we saw yesterday in that meeting, both in the visuals and in the conversation, was the president really trying to be and sound reasonable on a compromise around the Dreamers on DACA. If the president chooses to make this not just one-day photo op, but to show real leadership here, he actually could move us forward by getting a resolution to the status of Dreamers and new investment in border security.
All right, here's an update. A group of House conservatives led by Congressman Bob Goodlatte and backed by Speaker Paul Ryan is set to release their own immigration proposal today. It will reportedly call for aggressive border enforcement measures in a deal to help the Dreamers. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts is live for us on the North Lawn. John?
Good afternoon to you, Harris. The White House press pool right now in the cabinet room with the president, where he's holding his first cabinet meeting of 2018. So it's likely that we will hear directly from the president on this issue of Judge William Alsup, a district judge, federal district judge in San Francisco, last night ruling to block the rescission of the DACA program by the president. Clearly, he is not happy about it, tweeting this morning, quote, "It just shows everyone how broken and unfair our court system is when the opposing side of a case such as DACA always runs to the Ninth Circuit and almost always wins before being reversed by higher courts." Alsup is, as I pointed out, a district judge, but he falls within the jurisdiction of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. That's likely why a lawsuit was filed in that particular jurisdiction. But what the president said was actually quite tame compared to what the press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, said about it this morning, where she said, quote, "We find this decision to be outrageous, especially in light of the president's successful bipartisan meeting with House and Senate members at the White House on the same day. An issue of this magnitude must go through the normal legislative process." But in his ruling, and the judge may have been trying to tweak the president a little bit here, Judge Alsup actually quoted a tweet in which the president voiced his support for DACA, where the president wrote, quote, "Does anybody really want to throw out good, educated, and accomplished young people who have jobs, some serving in the military? Really?" Well, the judge basically said, "No, we don't want to do that, so I'm going to block your ruling." Now, all of this aside, including the White House ire, DHS Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen said this morning she doesn't think that this court action is going to affect in any way the efforts here at the White House and in Congress to reach a bipartisan agreement to fix the so-called Dreamers Act. Listen here.
We are very disappointed by the decision, but what we heard yesterday at the meeting was we're all committed to finding a deal. So a permanent solution is actually to the benefit of all the current DACA recipients, and that's what we'll pursue.
So what we've heard since that meeting and during that meeting yesterday is that there does seem to be some momentum toward finding some kind of fix here. The question is, what will be included in that fix? The president wants to fix DACA. He also wants some border security measures, including a wall and other items. And then he also wants an end to chain migration and an end to the visa lottery program. Yesterday, when he came out, the House Minority Whip Steny Hoyer said there was unanimity in the room about the need to address the issue of the Dreamers, but didn't say anything about border security. So we'll see where this goes.
And around we go. John Roberts, thank you.
Thanks, Harris.
So, Chris Stirewalt, I don't know how big of a deal this is. You'll have to tell me because, you know, January 19th will be here in a heartbeat.
Lordy day.
And the people in that room yesterday seemed to think that they needed to get this done before next Friday.
Well, there's people say that that this is a must-pass resolution. Never underestimate Congress's ability to fail. It is always within their power.
Great.
No.
You mean to get anything done?
Well, look, they're exhausted. They passed legislation, so they're very tired right now.
They had all of Christmas break.
They need time to recoup. The reality here is the funding legislation that they need to pass on the 19th to keep the government funding. Now we got debt ceiling, military authorization. We have multiple cans. We have cans tied together on a string, kicking them down the street. They have to address this on the 19th of January. Now, Democrats say they're not voting for it unless DACA is resolved. They won't vote for it. Now, I don't know that that's true. I don't know that that's 100% true. They say it. I don't know if it's true. On the other side, the Republicans say we're not voting for any DACA amnesty unless we have a wall. Now, I don't know that that's true either. I think we're finding out how much each side is bluffing about this, and the appropriate thing is happening. The House is promulgating legislation. The Senate's going to promulgate legislation.
And we'll see some of that today from the House. Well, and what was interesting, too, as you listened to that meeting yesterday, the president said, you know, I understand that there are parts of where you would, you know, put a long fence line or a wall that will work, and there are parts which won't. We'll take a look at that. And it isn't that he hasn't probably known that all along, but now we're starting to hear even more detail about that as they move forward.
He's also said that before as well.
That's what I'm saying. It's not something that we didn't know before, but now it's in more detail because I got to get a deal.
Can I have an addendum to, can I revise and extend my remarks?
You can reclaim your time.
I wish to reclaim my time, madam. And it's this. The most important thing that happened yesterday in that meeting wasn't any substantive discussion. But as Senator Coons said and others said, after 10 days in which the discussion about Donald Trump was, is he too senile and stupid to be president? People said, oh, he seems to have a command of these issues. He is conversant. He is nimble. He is moving around the table. He is engaging people. He is, as you said before, bringing Democrats in, Republicans in. He was inhabiting the persona of a transpartisan deal maker.
Which is why they did it, probably.
Well, yes, of course. And it worked, and it was 55 minutes of him being in command and him having command of the issues.
Speaking of which, the president's been holding his cabinet meeting today, and we're about to get to that now. But we are told that he talked about just that in this meeting, talking about how networks covered that meeting, said he received notes of congratulations from many people about his
holding an hour-long meeting
of that meeting from various television network anchors. But he does talk, guys, and this is important, securing border, the depleted military, talking about Moon Jae-in. He said the phone call was very good. Nikki Haley was brief, but not on the call. The president's getting to a lot of very serious issues in this cabinet meeting. Let's listen.
Welcome back to the studio. Nice to have you. Want to close that door when they're finished, please? Good morning and welcome to our first cabinet meeting of the new year. 2017 was a year of tremendous achievement, monumental achievement, actually. I don't think any administration has done what we've done and what we've accomplished in its first year, which isn't quite finished yet. You never know what's going to happen over the next few days. And the achievements for our country, our people, and for our standing in the world have been very monumental. We confirmed an incredible new Supreme Court justice and more circuit court judges in our first year than any administration in the history of our country. And we have many more coming. We've set a new record on reducing regulation and all forms of stopping growth and stopping jobs that were crippling America's economy. Again, the records that we set, 22-1, nobody's ever come close. And the amount of regulations that we've cut is a record also in our country's history, as reported by many newspapers, in particular the Wall Street Journal did a big story on it. And before Christmas, we passed the largest tax cut and reform in American history, including ANWR and including the fact that the individual mandate was terminated, which is a tremendously important thing and a very popular thing, I must tell you. People are supposed to pay for the privilege of not having health care. That was not good. Unfortunately, the courts didn't cut it, but we cut it. So in addition to the largest tax cut and reform in history, we have one of the great oil sites that's now been approved. They've been trying to approve ANWR. I don't know if people know this. For over 40 years, Ronald Reagan tried to get it approved for exploration and for drilling. And for 40 years, they've been trying to get it approved. That was in the bill, an individual mandate in the bill. Since that tax cut was enacted, more than 1 million workers have already received a tax cut bonus, something that, frankly, nobody even thought about. We didn't think about it. Nobody thought about it. We just knew a lot of good things were going to happen. And I must say AT&T was at the first one, and they did it $1,000 per employee. They have hundreds of thousands of employees. And many companies followed immediately thereafter, and now they're following. I guess the employees are saying, what about us? And millions of employees in this country are getting $1,000 and more in some cases, tax bonuses because of the tax cuts. Hardworking American families will receive tremendous tax relief. We lowered our tax rates, nearly doubled the standard deduction, and doubled the child tax credit, which Ivanka Trump was pushing very, very hard, I will tell you that. And so was Marco Rubio. And I will tell you that the Republican Senate, we had no Democrat support, zero. They didn't want tax cuts. They want tax increases. They want to raise your taxes. They don't want to cut your taxes. But the child tax credit has become very important to the American family, and they're very happy about it. Our historic reductions to the business tax will raise annual household income by an average of $4,000. That's a tremendous number. The amount of money that's going to be brought in, we think it's going to be close to $4 trillion because of our tax reform. Will be a number that this country has never seen pour into our country. And that's going to create more jobs and more investment. The stock market is shattering one record after another. Unemployment is at a 17-year low. And I'm very proud of this. African American unemployment reached its lowest level in history. Think of that. And on the campaign trail, remember I said, and would constantly say, what do you have to lose? Meaning, what do you have to lose if you vote for Trump? And now, it was just reported, African American unemployment is at its lowest level in history. I'm very proud of that. We're also making America safe again. Yesterday, we had a bipartisan meeting with House members and senators on immigration reform, something they've been talking about for many, many years. But we brought them together in this room, and it was a tremendous meeting. Actually, it was reported as incredibly good. And my performance, some of them called it a performance. I consider it work. But got great reviews by everybody other than two networks who were phenomenal for about 2 hours. Then after that, they were called by their bosses and say, oh, wait a minute. And unfortunately, a lot of those anchors sent us letters saying that was one of the greatest meetings they've ever witnessed. And they were great. For about 2 hours, they were phenomenal. And then they went a little bit south on us, but not that bad. It was fun. They probably wish they didn't send us those letters of congratulations, but it was good. I'm sure their ratings were fantastic. They always are. Which is why I think the media will ultimately support Trump in the end, because they're going to say, if Trump doesn't win in 3 years, they're all out of business. You guys will be out of business, but the boom holders are still going to be there, so that's good. Those are the people I like. We agreed to pursue 4 major areas yesterday of reform. Securing our border, including, of course, the wall, which has always been included, never changed. Ending chain migration, canceling the visa lottery, and addressing the status of the DACA population. We want to see something happen with DACA. It's been spoken of for years. And children are now adults in many cases. The numbers are very different, very varying. A lot of people say 800,000. Some people said yesterday, first time I heard 650, I also heard 3 million. Fact is, our country was such a mess, nobody even knows what the numbers are. But we'll know what the numbers are. But above all else, any bill we pass must improve jobs, wages, and security for American citizens. The people who elected us, all of us, the people that elected us, we have to take care of them. We have to have a strong military. We can't play games with our military. Whether we're Democrat or whether we're Republican, we have to have a strong, that's not a point of negotiation. We can't say, oh, we're going to give you money for your military, but you have to give us money for something that, frankly, is much less important than security. And we have to keep our country strong. And our military was badly depleted over the last long period of time, beyond President Obama, I will say, beyond President Obama. Our military was very, very badly depleted. I just spoke to President Moon. He's very thankful for what we've done. They're having talks with North Korea. We'll see how that happens. He felt that the initial talk was extremely good, had a lot of good comment. Rex was on the phone, and Nikki's been totally briefed, but we had a very, very good conversation, and we'll see where it goes. He's very thankful for what we've done. It was so reported today that we were the ones without our attitude that would have never happened. Who knows where it leads? Hopefully it'll lead to success for the world, not just for our country, but for the world. And we'll be seeing over the next number of weeks and months what happens. On a separate front, we are going to take a strong look at our country's libel laws so that when somebody says something that is false and defamatory about someone, that person will have meaningful recourse in our courts. If somebody says something that's totally false and knowingly false, that the person that has been abused, defamed, libeled, will have meaningful recourse. Our current libel laws are a sham and a disgrace and do not represent American values or American fairness. So we're going to take a strong look at that. We want fairness. You can't say things that are false, knowingly false, and be able to smile as money pours into your bank account. We're going to take a very, very strong look at that. And I think what the American people want to see is fairness. Finally, as we begin the new year, I want to thank my cabinet for working tirelessly on behalf of our country. Every single day, every hour, I'm on the phone with almost all of them all the time. And we have a lot of exciting things to go. I'm just looking at Alex Cost. What a job you've done with our health care. Now, he's Secretary of Labor, but he's very much involved in health care. And I think those rules and regulations will be out around February 1st, Alex, as I understand it. And this is health care through association and associations. And I think that millions and millions and millions of people will be signing up. It'll be highly competitive. He has been able to totally get rid of state lines, so there'll be tremendous competition. And that will be a phase of healthcare that people don't talk about. But I think ultimately you'll have more people than you actually had even in Obamacare. And it's just a segment of what we're doing. So I just want to tell you, I read a lot of those papers last night, and it is really great work, brilliant work. I think it is something that people don't talk about, but it's something that's going to be very exciting and very great. It will be great health care at a very competitive price. There'll be tremendous competition, and it will cost the United States absolutely zero. So we're very proud of that. Thank you, Alex. And with that, we'll start our cabinet meeting, and we appreciate your being here. And you've gotten very familiar with this room. I appreciate your nice comments yesterday. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you very much.
How do you want Republicans to take control of the Russia investigation?
Thank you very much, everybody.
Do you want them to shut down the Russian?
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
President, did you tell you that you guys are not doing military action in North Korea?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
The president not taking any questions or answering any questions there at the end on North Korea and the Russia investigation. What he did talk about there at his first cabinet meeting of the new year, he called 2017 a year of tremendous achievement. He talked about setting records by cutting regulations. He touted tax reform and the effect that that's having on the economy and the low unemployment rate in this country. And he talked about the stock market and shattering records there. Often you hear that from the president. He did use this as an opportunity opportunity to tout that yet again. And he referenced back to that meeting yesterday we've been talking about, and he said it was a tremendous meeting, and he received notes of congratulations from various people. He then moved on to immigration reform and those libel laws. The president just wrapping up his first cabinet meeting of 2018.
Steve Bannon is stepping down from his post as executive chairman of the website Breitbart News. The move comes after backlash over remarks attributed to Steve Bannon and a new book. Maybe you heard about that. Meanwhile, the Washington Post is reporting Bannon told associates he plans to focus on creating a political operation in 2018. And he's banking on President Trump needing help from him again in the future, predicting that congressional Republicans will eventually desert the president. Will that happen, Chris?
Well, it depends on how things go. You know, one of the challenges that Steve Bannon has, he views the world, he sees the world in these weird, large, historical swoops and sweeps. And he compares himself to one of the courtiers for the House of Tudor, or he compares himself to all of these grandiose things and all of this big stuff. Most of what happens in Washington, I wish people could understand this. This is my fervent prayer for my country. Most of what happens in Washington, most of what I cover, most of what we do is incremental and annoying. Most of what happens in little meetings, and it happens by accidents, and then a little bill passes, and then that doesn't happen, and that confirmation doesn't go through. There are not you do not feel the thundering jets of history reverberating over the canyons of time. And Steve Bannon lives in this bizarro space. Maybe the president's going to need him later. Maybe he's not. But here's a good tip for you. Don't trash talk his children. And don't lose him back-to-back Senate races in Alabama. There's a good starting place.
Yeah.
So, you know, Katie, just looking forward, and no disrespect to the Democrat on the couch today.
No, I love when sentences start that way.
This is a gap in time now, right? This is a gap in time. We know that after the presidential election, Democrats have still been trying to gather their message, so on and so forth. So this is a time for the party to do what with or without Steve Bannon?
I think it's pretty clear that people are backing President Trump over Steve Bannon. And when you lose the Breitbart audience, if you go and look at the comments that were left on the website after this blew up in Bannon's face, it's very clear which side people are on. And I'm not so sure that they're going to go back to Bannon as someone who's going to be the leader of the grassroots movement. Let's not
what
forget.
does that mean for the party, though?
Well, I don't know what it means for the party, but when it comes to Bannon was supposed to be a grassroots activist kind of guy. He rode in on the Tea Party wave of 2010, was heavily involved in the turnover of the House of Representatives, involved in Tea Party movements all over the country. I don't know if they're really going to take him back on this. It's going to take someone else to get in there and get that job done.
Well, I think you've got a president now who he doesn't need Steve Bannon, according to Katie and Chris. So what do you do in the meantime as Democrats?
Well, we'll see in the Republican Party what, if any, role Steve Bannon plays in 2018. We have a Senate race in Arizona that has Kelly Ward, Joe Arpaio now, that has a lot of Bannon supporters and Trump supporters playing in that primary space. Will he play a role? Will it matter? You have the Dean Heller primary that he has played a role in. Will it matter? We don't know the answers to these questions, but Donald Trump isn't on the ballot this November, and Republicans are. And Steve Bannon, a test for his staying power will be if he plays a role and if it matters, because so far this year he has a losing streak.
Well, who else is going to play a role? I mean, Steve Bannon was not the only person who was involved in this movement that carried Republicans to power. There were a lot of other people involved at the grassroots level and, quite frankly, at the establishment level. And when it comes to the record so far of the losses here, candidates are going to have to look at Steve Bannon's record and go, do I want to be another losing category on his background?
Sad! Exclamation point.
A surprising take on politics by a New York Times columnist who admits he's no fan of the president. He's accusing the anti-Trump movement of, quote, getting dumber. We'll talk about that. Oh, Chris likes that story.
New York Times columnist David Brooks explaining why he believes the anti-Trump movement, quote, seems to be getting dumber and becoming less effective. Brooks writing, quote, the anti-Trump movement seems to be settling into a smug fairy tale version of reality that filters out discordant information. More anti-Trumpers seem to be telling themselves a madness of King George narrative. Trump is a semi-literate madman surrounded by sycophants who are morally, intellectually, and psychologically inferior to people like us. Chris Steyerwalt, the title of his column is The Decline of Anti-Trumpism, which he says suffers from lowbrowism. Explain what that means.
Fire emoji, fire emoji, fire emoji, fire emoji. Look, David Brooks is 100% right because, and we don't want to pretend like this is only a phenomenon of the anti-Trump left. This was, by the way, fair to point out, about the same point in Barack Obama's presidency that birtherism cropped up and got real hot. Because part of it is this isn't happening. This just isn't happening. This can't be real. This guy's not really president. And remember, we started out with Trump, not my president. Hashtag not my president. This isn't happening. And then he'll be unprecedented by the Russians. The Comey's going to make him unpresident. Well, then maybe Mueller's going to make him unpresident. And as they go through, now very much they bought into this Wolf book, which is, I don't want to call it trash, but it's a gossip book. It's a Kitty Kelly book. It's a hushed whispers in hallways at the White House, loosely sourced. This is supposed to be popcorn, not steak.
Right.
And they're clinging to this and they're clinging to these notions because they just don't want what's happening to be real. That's bad for them, but it's also bad for the country because it keeps them out of the kinds of discussions that you saw yesterday where you get them around the table and people can actually talk.
Marie, what about that point, though? Because we have to come down to substance. And don't you think Americans tune out when it comes to just throwing up these accusations that may or may not be true, that are salacious and dramatic, rather than talking about policies which impact everyday people's lives?
Well, I think we have to do both. And some of the accusations about President Trump's behavior, that he's erratic and emotional, those have been backed up by reporting from mainstream reporters and by his own behavior. But that's not enough for Democrats to run on. And I've said that every single time we talk about this. So you see Democratic candidates on the campaign trail who are not focusing necessarily on Donald Trump. They are focusing on a Democratic policy message. And you saw that yesterday with the folks that were at the White House. So you have to be able to do both. But I don't think we should discount everything in the Wolf book because he's not like the world's best.
What about,
Well, go ahead.
Harris, go ahead.
I, too, thought this was an incredibly important piece.
Yeah.
And obviously making it even more important and relevant is the fact that he is anti-Trump himself. But he talked about the insularity that the anti-Trump movement suffers from. And he goes into detail about most of the people who detest Trump don't know anybody who works with him or supports him.
Right.
And if they do have friends or family members who admire Trump, they've learned to not even talk about the subject. So they get most of their information about Trumpism from others who also detest Trumpism. And I think those are really relevant things that were relevant during the campaign. But he's kind of saying they're blossoming into
True
full
on both
bloom
sides,
now.
I would simply say misery loves company. That's why you're seeing kind of the low brow attack on
Lowbrowism, as you said.